Picture this. You're setting out on a seemingly endless trek across the vast, unforgiving expanse of 19th century Russia. You've got absolutely no money, no home, and really no specific destination. You are armed with nothing but a knapsack filled with dry crusts of bread, a Bible, and one single burning spiritual question that literally keeps you awake at night. Well, that is the true, completely captivating premise we are unpacking today. So let's dive right into this explainer and follow in the footsteps of an anonymous Russian peasant. As you'll see, his relentless physical journey led to one of the most profound spiritual discoveries in history. This remarkable journey is chronicled in a foundational 19th century spiritual classic called The Way of a Pilgrim. Now, when we hear terms like Christian mysticism or spiritual journey, we usually think of these very abstract, floaty concepts, right? But what's really fascinating about this particular book is how it completely demystifies all of those ideas. Today, we're going to break down this pilgrim's literal, muddy-booted journey across the country, and more importantly, the highly practical, replicable science of prayer he uncovered along the way. We are basically turning a historical travelogue into a concrete, practical prayer guide. So here is our roadmap for today. We'll be looking at 1. The Pilgrim's Quest, 2. The Science of Prayer, 3. The Jesus Prayer Explained, 4. The Rule of Discipline, and finally, 5. Fruits of the Journey. Okay, part 1. The Pilgrim's Quest, searching for unceasing prayer. So leaving the city of Irkutsk and wandering toward Kyiv, our pilgrim is absolutely gripped by a specific biblical instruction from St. Paul. The instruction, to pray without ceasing. Sounds beautiful, right? It's a very noble goal, but it led our guy straight into a brick wall. Like, how do you actually do that continuously? As he wandered, he actively sought out renowned spiritual directors and devout experts to ask them this exact question. And he experienced this deep, agonizing frustration because, sure, these experts could give him wonderful philosophical discourses. They could talk for hours about why prayer is necessary, the power of it, the spiritual benefits of a pure heart, but not a single one of them could explain the practical, actionable mechanics of how to actually do it nonstop. They had all the theory in the world, but zero user manual. Which brings us to part 2, the science of prayer, the art of arts. His massive breakthrough finally arrived when he crossed paths with a starets. Now, a starets is a seasoned spiritual elder, and this guy completely shifted the paradigm for our pilgrim. He reframed prayer from a vague, mystical feeling that you just kind of hope washes over you into a rigorous, structured discipline. In fact, he called it the art of arts and the science of sciences. To teach him this science, the starets introduced the pilgrim to a monumental text called the Philokalia. That word literally translates to love of the good and beautiful. And I want you to think of the Philokalia as the ultimate ancient instructional manual for the interior prayer of the heart. Compiled from the writings of Eastern Orthodox spiritual masters, it is definitely not a book of theory. It's a detailed, step-by-step guidebook on how to cultivate a continuous interior spiritual life. Suddenly, the pilgrim wasn't wandering in the dark anymore. He finally had his textbook. All right, part 3, the Jesus Prayer Explained, the core formula. So, you might be wondering, what was the actual prayer? Well, the starets revealed a deceptively simple formula. Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. Yep, that's it. It's a concise sentence perfectly designed to quiet human anxiety and fill the heart with love for all creation. Let's actually break down the sheer brilliance packed into that short sentence, just like our sources do. The first half, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, guides the mind directly into the majesty of the divine. It encompasses the entirety of the gospel history and the supreme power of the Creator. Then, the second half, have mercy on me, a sinner, perfectly captures the humble reality of our human weakness. It's the ultimate expression of our need, our brokenness, and our hope for reconciliation. It brilliantly balances immense divine power with profound human humility. In fact, the pilgrim learns from his teachers that the Jesus Prayer is the abbreviated version of the entire Bible, because it contains both the deepest truths of God's identity and the gritty reality of the human condition. The Holy Fathers believed this one simple, repetitive sentence held the full theological weight of the Scriptures. You really don't need to haul a massive library around to carry the core of the faith with you. It is entirely contained within just those few words. Moving on to part 4, the rule of discipline, practical mechanics. Now, the starets didn't just hand the pilgrim the words and send him on his merry way. No, he gave him a strict, practical discipline, a true physical and mental regimen to follow day in and day out. The rules of engagement were incredibly specific. First up, he was to use a chapki, which is a traditional prayer rope or rosary. to meticulously track his recitations. He was ordered to start with exactly 3,000 repetitions every single day. Literally, no more, no less. He was to read only from the Philokalia and very specific text on the interior life, completely cutting out all other mental distractions. On top of that, he was restricted to just 5 or 6 hours of sleep at night, and he was to remain in silence and solitude as much as humanly possible. The underlying philosophy here is absolutely fascinating. Sheer quantity and frequency of prayer eventually pave the way to pure quality. You build the rigid habit first, and the grace follows. And let me tell you, the Pilgrim was dedicated. After he mastered the 3,000 repetitions, the stars increased his daily quota. He quickly scaled up to an astonishing 12,000 daily repetitions. Just think about that volume for a second. 12,000. At that point, the prayer completely ceased being a chore and became this relentless, driving habit. The Pilgrim actually noted that if he stopped, he felt this compelling, almost physical need to start reciting it again. It consumed his entire day, to the point where his lips and tongue seemed to just form the words of their own accord, completely effortlessly. But this science goes even deeper into the physical body. As he progressed, the texts of the Philokalia taught him how to internalize the prayer, moving it from just his lips down to his actual heart. This required a profound, very early form of mindfulness. The steps are incredibly specific here. First, draw the mind away from all those chaotic, swirling thoughts of the head and focus it down into the literal physical location of the heart. Second, sync the words of the prayer to the actual physical beating of the heart, word by word, beat by beat. And third, tie the prayer to a steady rhythm of inhaling and exhaling. The spiritual discipline literally becomes intertwined with his fundamental biological life functions. It's wild. And right alongside this physical synchronization is a rigorous mental discipline known as watchfulness. See, this isn't just about saying words. It's about guarding your mind like it's a fortress. Watchfulness means focusing solely on the words of the Jesus prayer and aggressively repelling all other wandering thoughts. And here is the real kicker. The sources emphasize repelling all thoughts, whether they are bad, distracting, or even seemingly good and pious thoughts. They gotta go. During this specific practice, the mind must be entirely empty of everything except the invocation of the name, standing like an unyielding guard at the door of the heart. And finally, part 5, fruits of the journey, the transformation. So what actually happens when a human being dedicates themselves to this intense level of continuous, synchronized focus? Well, the internal shifts are breathtaking. The prayer eventually transitions from a conscious, manual effort into a self-acting, continuous rhythm. It essentially runs in the background of his soul, like an operating system, even when he's sleeping or talking. The personal accounts he shares in the book are just incredible. He writes, "If I felt ill and pain racked my back and legs, I would give myself over to the prayer, and soon was deaf to the pain." He recounts how this unceasing interior prayer generated actual physical warmth when he was trudging through the bitter Russian winter. It masked his physical hunger when he had absolutely nothing to eat. But most importantly, it brought him this unshakable, overwhelming joy, making literally every person he met seem as dear to him as his own family. Now, the core takeaway here regarding human suffering is absolutely vital. We have to understand that the ultimate goal of this science of prayer isn't to act as some magical spell that just removes life's burdens, poverty, or physical pain. I mean, the Pilgrim was still homeless. He was still walking through freezing mud and snow, and he was even violently robbed during his journey. Instead, this practical discipline empowered him to endure those harsh realities with a deep, unbreakable internal peace. It provided a fortress of joy that external, worldly circumstances simply could not penetrate. Which brings us to a really compelling thought to leave you with today. Look, we aren't 19th century peasants wandering the frozen steppes, right? But we are wandering through a modern world that is entirely built on endless distraction, anxiety, and mental fragmentation. The Pilgrim used a simple rosary, a short phrase, and his own heartbeat to build impenetrable focus and profound peace. So what would happen today if you disciplined your own mind to aggressively filter out the noise and focus on a single, unceasing truth? Could this ancient science of mental watchfulness and continuous spiritual focus radically transform your own chaotic daily life? Honestly, it's a journey worth considering.